I was gently nudged awake in the middle of the night. I saw my 4-year-old son standing in front of me, clutching his favorite bear. He whispered something inaudibly to me. In my haze, I could not make out what he said. I asked, "What, buddy?" And then it became clear. "There's another daddy downstairs," he whispered in that apprehensive way that he does. "What?" I said. I heard him, but I could not believe what he just said. "There's another daddy downstairs. Just like you, but he's angry." "Okay, buddy," I said as I lifted him up and set him in my bed beside his mother. I pulled the aluminum baseball bat out from behind the bedstand and crept downstairs as quietly as I could. Surely, I would have heard someone coming in the house. The alarm system had not gone off. I padded softly as I stepped, hoping my son was having a bad dream. By the time my foot touched the bottom step, I smelt it. It had not smelt in years, but you never forget it. Single malt scotch. The air was pungent with it. I had not drank in 4 years, but the aroma was unmistakable. Who brought alcohol into this house? I never noticed the creaking hardwood floors before, but they sounded like thunder in an otherwise quiet house. Then I heard the panting. Someone was here. The panting was rage, pure and undeniable, almost like a dog just after a fight, when he's not quite ready for the fight to be over. I peered around the corner into the dining room from where the breathing was coming. Whatever was breathing was stationary. I gazed around, and even in the darkness I could make out the moonlight splashing on the figure of a man standing, facing a wall. He did not notice me. It stood there, heavy breathing, just facing a blank wall. No, wait, the wall isn't blank. There's something on it. It's my wife's bridal portrait. The monster is just breathing intense rage at it, and it looks like he's damaged it somehow. I wait for another few seconds for my eyes to adjust. It's clear. He's smeared the word whore on the bridal portrait. I'm now beyond panic. I grip the bat tightly. I'm frozen between that fight or flight stage. Do I grab my wife and son and run? Or do I attack it while it doesn't notice me? Even if I did attack it, it's so hopped up on adrenaline right now, I don't think I could harm it. In my moment of indecision, I finally could make out whoever this is. He does look like me. The decision to fight or run was made for me. It slowly turned and peered over its shoulder at me and says in a haunting graveled voice, "I hate you." What? I could barely get out in dismay. "I hate you. I hate everything about you. This is your fault. All of it. I hope you fucking die." The heart-pounding terror that washed over me was like none I had ever experienced. I finally realized blood was everywhere. Everywhere. It was all over the walls, the floors, his clothes, his hair. It was like he bathed the room in it. "How dare you marry that fucking harlot? I told you a decade ago this would happen. And now, I'm going to kill you." It turned and began to come at me. I slammed the door at the bottom of the stairs shut, and I could feel him pulling against it. I heard him screaming on the other side like a rabid dog, banging against it with the fury of a pack of wolves. The struggle went on for what seemed like an eternity. Several times I nearly lost the grip on my door handle, and then it suddenly stopped. I took a moment to catch my breath. I was too afraid to let go of the door. Whatever this thing was, I didn't want it crawling up the side of the house or trying to sneak into the second floor window. So in a panic, I dashed upstairs to grab my son. I flipped the light on and saw him covered in blood, sitting on my bed, beside my wife, whose skull had been bashed in. "Daddy, you made Mommy sick with your bat. Why did you do that?" The bat was covered in blood and chunks of bone and hair. Blood soaked my shirt and face. What had I done? I was holding the bat in my right hand and something in my left. It was my glass of scotch. I don't partake in social networking. I don't do it, and I don't particularly like it. I'm well aware that predators use the format to lure their prey. I know full well that it's probably a waste of time, that one typically loses a great amount of authentic connection with their peers and even their family. I realize that this sort of thing does nothing but inflate an already swollen ego. I acknowledge all of these things without hesitation, but the truth is, I couldn't stop logging in to observe my ex-girlfriend's page. I truly, honestly couldn't. Maybe it's that my life had turned a little sour the past few years, and hers had done nothing but improve. I'm not typically a jealous person by nature, but when your ex-girlfriend turns into a supermodel, it's hard to not purse your lips. Okay, maybe supermodel is going a little far, but she was looking pretty amazing. Her skin had cleared up, she was in better shape, and really seemed to take pride in her appearance these days. I looked at these pictures and just wondered what it was about me or our relationship that kept her from being the best she could be. I know that in some ways I had hurt the girl. I teased her about her appearance all the time. It mostly concerned the frumpy way she put herself together, or how she didn't wash her hair as often as she could have, but nothing too nasty. I really was fond of her, and I thought our 2 years together were pretty special. However, we started to drift apart emotionally. I wanted some excitement. She wanted a big family. After a big argument one night in my kitchen, the relationship was over. She found a place somewhere across town, and we haven't spoken since. Lately, things have been far from swell for me. My current girlfriend, Gian, left me. My dog had been hit by a car, and I'd been sick and sweating in bed with tuberculosis. After endless rounds of antibiotics, I was getting to a point where I could stand again. But the past few months had been some of the worst of my life. The coughing had left my chest so sore, I could barely even turn over. That's when I took an even deeper dive into watching my ex online. I didn't have much else to do. While she was mostly unemployed during our time together, she's since enrolled in a nursing school and earned a degree. Her current boyfriend is definitely handsome, and from what I gather in his pictures, rather loaded. He was always standing before the lip of the ocean, the top of the mountain, or the elegant veranda that they must have shared every evening now. Their lives looked, admittedly, pretty sweet. And as the past few weeks went on, I checked her page every day. Reading her posts, I saw that when she wasn't fine dining or skiing, she was saving lives at a hospital. She hiked with her man every morning and cuddled their 2 puppies together at night. She doesn't own a television anymore. It's a waste of beautiful life. I couldn't believe the person she'd become. She'd become much like the woman I'd wanted her to be. 3 years late. I became a little obsessed. I thought about her way more often than I'd care to admit. I wondered if she ever thought about me, if she ever discussed me with her new rich man. I figured they both would find my situation rather pathetic, or funny, or both. So I never messaged her, never had the guts. I just really wanted to know if I'd been forgotten or not, if she thought about me at all, and if she did, was it in a positive way? All these things were running through my head repeatedly the day I copied her home address and put it in my navigation system. Now, I was in no way planning to speak to her. I just wanted to get a glimpse of where she lived. And I'll also admit that I had a faint hope that she would be outdoors so I could catch a glimpse of her in person as I drove by. I'm not a stalker type, believe me, but this was just consuming me in a way I hadn't felt before. I needed something more than a goddamn Facebook page. I pulled past the home I was directed to and found myself stopping a couple of houses down. I pulled over and watched the house in my rearview mirror for about 45 minutes. I know, it's a long time, but she did come out. I turned around in my seat and caught a glimpse as she stepped into her sedan. I wished I'd been closer. She was definitely looking pretty good. It made me heat up a little inside. One part nerves, the other attraction. Without realizing it, my hand had pulled open the car door and my feet were carrying me down the sidewalk. I believed my plan was to very briefly scope the place out and then I'd be back home. What I did, in reality, was quite different. After seeing that the house was very still and most likely empty at this hour of the afternoon, I headed to the backyard, just for a peek. It was plain, boring, not much to see there, so I turned to the back of the home and saw that it was only covered with a screen door. The main one was left open. I walked a little closer and squinted. The house looked empty from where I was. I saw no furniture, wall hangings, or anything of the sort. This discovery brought me closer to the door, guided my grip to the handle. I so very carefully pulled it open and stepped inside. The house was definitely empty. It was dusty and stale. There were no dogs or lovely verandas around here. I was beyond confused. I made my way very quietly to the main living area and found a mattress on the center of the floor, covered in rustled sheets and blankets. On the pillow was a laptop cord reaching from the wall. I began to shake, to tremble for reasons I just hadn't expected. I approached the computer and pried it open, illuminating the screen. It was my Facebook page. As this fact registered, I started to feel queasy, like my illness was back in full force. I read over my last wall posts. They were all old. I hadn't made a post in months. The first one was referring to my last girlfriend, Jean. My girlfriend is starting to love my dog more than me. The next was a picture of my busted knee from last year. I'd fallen playing hockey with friends and then posted that from the hospital. That's when everything started to make itself clear. I scanned through all of her own Facebook photos. There were no pictures of her with anyone else, just pictures of other people she stuck throughout her collection. Everyone who posts on her page is from her hometown 300 miles away. I began to wonder if she'd ever been to nursing school when I saw a white uniform hanging from a ceiling fan in the other room. Questioning everything, I paused in the still house and thought long and hard. I remembered a conversation she and I had about medical science. She was so interested in how diseases progressed, which are the most silent killers, which are the most painful, and how they can be transmitted to humans. I felt adrenaline start to course my veins and sweat gather above my lip. I remembered the experiments with frogs and turtles she practiced as a kid. My mouth was watering and my stomach was churning as I ran toward her refrigerator. I swung open the door to the chatter of glass vials ticking against each other. I started choking back vomit as I read the labels and dates. Hep C 7/19/13, Hep B 1/30/13, tuberculosis 2/22/13. Taped to the inside of the fridge was a list of all my doctor's appointments for surgery, follow-ups, and physical therapy. I finally vomited all over the kitchen floor, taking in deep gulps of breath with tears filling my eyes. I realized who ran over my dog. This took place after my parents had divorced, but they lived close to each other, so it wasn't all bad. Anyway, I would frequently forget stuff at my mom's house and would take it up to my dad's house. This was almost a nightly thing. So, one night, I was bringing my Xbox and some games to my dad's house, and one thing to note is that this was one of those double houses, if that makes any sense. Anyway, to get to my dad's house, I had to pass their side first. While I was passing their house, the presumed wife stopped me and asked me to come closer. I thought that since my dad shared houses with her and her husband that he knew and trusted her, so I went. She noticed the Xbox and games in my hands and straight up said, "Hey, we have a bunch of fun games and little boys your age that will play with you in here. Do you want to come in?" I slowly backed away, not turning my head to her. As I was doing so, I felt a cold, large hand on my right shoulder. My blood ran cold. I didn't dare turn around. I heard from behind me, "She isn't this nice all the time. I suggest you take her up on her offer." My fight or flight kicked in, and I chose flight. His grip wasn't all that good, so I escaped easily and ran inside. I didn't tell my dad, but I did call the police. I couldn't live knowing that they could have multiple kids in there. A few minutes passed and a police car showed up. 5 minutes later, the two officers walked out of the house with the two people. Apparently, they'd been luring kids into their house with the promise of games and toys. I still imagine what would have happened if the man's grip was stronger, and thank God I chose to call the police. They had 2 kids in the house, both boys. So, creepy couple who lure kids into their house, let's never meet again. This happened about a year ago now. I'm a college student and I was basically forced to move out on my own, which I didn't mind, but that meant finding a new roommate, which can be a daunting and scary experience. I've had a few weird encounters, but I think this one takes the cake. I posted on Craigslist looking for a bedroom in a shared house or apartment for $300 or less, and on my ad, I mentioned, please, no phone calls, only texts or email. I honestly find the whole experience of talking to a stranger on the phone to be a really uncomfortable situation. I'm just awkward, I guess. Anyway, I got a call from a dude who clearly didn't read the no calls part, which I mentioned because this type of phone call was exactly the reason I don't like to talk to strangers on the phone. At first, he was just pleasant and normal, told me he had a room available and relevant information like that. We started to talk about when and where we'd meet, and he started going on tangents about random stuff. I'm a combination of too interested in deep conversation and too awkward to end the call when it started to get weird. So this call went on for 2 hours, and we talked about the meaning of life and all kinds of weird shit. Honestly, this should have been the red flag, and I shouldn't have met him, and of course, I should have grown a pair and told him I needed to leave. So, he wants me to meet him at his place and show me the room. I've since learned that you should really insist on meeting in public first. I got to his neighborhood, and it was run down on a level that made the ghetto I grew up in look nice. Saggy front porches, hot cracked concrete, sad people with old beat up Lincolns. You get the picture. His house blended right in. The yard was seriously overgrown and the front door didn't work, so I went around the back and just looking at the guy standing in the doorway and seeing the kitchen behind him was enough to make me realize I really just wanted to leave. No way in hell. The guy in the doorway was a man with a sort of clown-style afro. He was just leaning on a cane on his right side. His eyes looked crazy and the house smelt musty from 10 feet away. Again, I'm a coward, so instead of trusting my gut, I go inside and I'm polite thinking, it's okay, it'll be over in 20 minutes and I can get the fuck out. I don't know what made me think this man, who had a 2-hour conversation with me on the phone about life and philosophy, would let me get away that easily. He took me up a flight of creaky steps into a small bedroom with no door and a mattress on the floor. I thought no way in hell I would live in this place with a 40-something-year-old man and no door in my bedroom. but it was a moot point because my mind was made up before I even saw the room. I wouldn't have lived there for free, let alone for $200 a month. Things got weird. He tried to hold me hostage with conversation again. I think he was lonely. He talked about how some of his family were millionaires. He might have been delusional. The whole story seemed made up. Then, he told me about an 18-year-old girl that also checked out the room and tried to fuck him. And told me about how his mom hated white people. He was black and I was white. And it sounded like he sympathized with her. Obviously, that was super uncomfortable. Eventually, I was able to find a break in conversation and plucked up the courage to make up an excuse to leave. I was never so happy to leave a place in my life. I don't know that he was necessarily a rapist or anything, but he really gave me the fucking creeps. Back in my early 20s, I moved to Melbourne to go to university. Because of some of my dodgy mates I knew from outside of uni, I somehow wound up as a go-to guy for drugs with my classmates. I fucking hated the reputation, but maybe felt a little bit cool at the same time. Ecstasy and speed mostly. I was at the bottom of the drug dealer food chain, the type of idiot who jacks the price up $10 a pill so he can make enough money to drink and party. I had no guilt of ripping these people off. These were mostly rich kids who lived with their parents and didn't have to have a job to support themselves through uni. Dealing them drugs was so easy and non-threatening. A few years after I finished uni, I was working an office job that was boring and paid peanuts. By now, my friends and I had pretty much grown out of the desire to take drugs on weekends. My drug dealing days had well and truly finished. Or so I thought. It was 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night. I just got home from a draining day at work and was exhausted and in a bad mood. I plunked myself on the couch and stared at the ceiling, trying to muster up the energy to get up and shower before bed. My phone starts flashing and vibrating on the coffee table next to me. I looked, and the caller ID said it was T-Bone, the nickname I had for a guy who I met at a festival years ago and ended up spending a bit of time here and there. He was a huge, friendly, weed-smoking, acid-tripping hipster with an impressive beard. I hadn't spoken to this guy in well over a year, so when I saw his caller ID on my phone, I immediately thought, the needs of drugs. I answered, and we exchanged some pleasantries, and then I could hear the tone in his voice change to this awkward, "Hey, could I ask you a favor?" kind of tone. He wanted drugs, and lots of them. $2,000 worth, to be precise. When I asked him what specifically he wanted, he just said, "As many ecstasies and bags of speed as that can get." This was way outside my comfort zone. Even when I was dealing back in uni, 10 pills was usually the maximum I would offload at any one time. It was late, I was tired, but I was also broke and figured that I could clear an easy $500 from purchasing from one of my guys I used to buy from. Something which T-Bone didn't need to know. I told T-Bone that I would call him back and see what I can do. To my surprise, the first person I called was Stover, and he was able to help me out, and he was only a 5-minute drive away. We discussed the terms and conditions, which seemed reasonable. 60 E's and 3 grams of speed for $1,500. I called T-Bone, and he was happy to part with $2,000 for this amount. I met Stover out front of his luxurious apartment building. We had a quick chat, and he joked about wanting to meet the guy I'm selling to. We shook hands, and was on my way to T-Bone. I asked T-Bone where he wanted to meet, and he told me where he was. I Google mapped the address. It was a 45-minute drive from me. Had I known he was this far away, I wouldn't have agreed to sell him anything, but I couldn't go back now. The address he gave me was in what is probably the worst neighborhood in Australia, known for its violent crimes, murder, and of course drug dealing. I started the journey. I now had plenty of time to think about how stupid I am. I had a ridiculously illegal amount of drugs on me, driving out to the roughest neighborhood in the country. After ages of sitting on the freeway, I took the exit and was approaching my destination. At this point, I was so tired that I was in an almost dreamlike state. Every set of lights I pulled up to, people in cars next to me would give me greasy looks, trying to act hard and start a confrontation. I pulled into the street where the house was. "Your destination is on your left," my phone told me. The street was so dark because the street lights were out and there was a cloud cover, so no moon. I couldn't see shit. The houses in the street looked dilapidated and abandoned. This didn't feel right. The house that T-Bone said he was at had boarded up front windows with shitty graffiti tags on them, and there wasn't any light on. I called T-Bone. No answer. For fuck's sake. I redialed and thought it was about to ring out when he picked up. "Hey T-Bone, I'm out front." Cool. Come on in," he said. "No, come out to the car," I replied. "Yeah, hang on a sec," he said, and hung up. I was thinking, shit, I hardly know this guy. He had been at a few parties I went to, we hung out, but I don't know anything about him. I saw him emerge from the side of the house, pushing through bushes that blocked the pathway. I was the only car parked on the street. He saw me and gestured for me to come on over. I had no idea who he was with, so I thought it was time to get into character. I took my jacket off so I was only wearing a white singlet and put my filthy black trucker cap on that I kept in the glove box. I was hoping this would help me look a bit more "don't fuck with me." My friends often joke about how I look tougher than I am. I have some football and kickboxing induced facial scars, combined with a pretty large physique from smashing weights for years. I was big enough and scary looking enough to be intimidating. The truth be known, I'm really a fucking marshmallow who avoids confrontations. I shook hands with T-Bone in the front yard of his place. I felt at ease when he gave me a happy greeting and thanked me for coming out this way. He told me to follow him, and we went through the bushes around to the back of the place. I could hear music. Sounds like they were pumping dubstep through shitty distorting speakers. I could hear a few people's voices, and I could smell cigarette smoke. T-Bone ripped the back door open, and the smell and sound hit me hard. I'd been to some nasty house parties, but this was horrific. There were 3 of them in the kitchen. There was a flashlight attached by string to the 12-foot ceiling, swinging back and forward, slowly pendulum style. This was the only lighting. The swinging light made it difficult to see the people in the kitchen, but with each sway, I would catch a glimpse of their faces. They were absolute toothless junkies, all shirtless, skinny, with bad tattoos. We entered the kitchen, and one of them closed the door behind us and stood in front of it, arms folded, as if he was guarding it. One of them came forward and told me his name was Jay, not like he was introducing himself. It was more of a statement. His face was full-blown meth fucked. He sized me up, and then looked at T-Bone and said, "I thought you fucking said he was a fucking pussy cunt." T-Bone looked at him in total shock. As Jay turned to T-Bone, the flashlight swung past, and I noticed he was holding a big screwdriver behind his back. Now I realized what was happening, and I felt like an idiot. I walked into a fucking ambush. Get a guy with a shitload of drugs to come around and rob him. Fuck. Jay turned back to me. He was about 6 feet away from me. He showed me the screwdriver and said, "What have you got for me?" With that big front teeth missing smile. The fact I was so tired and pissed off kind of worked for me because I didn't show I was shitting myself. I squared up to him and said in a no-nonsense tone, "Give me the cash and I'll show you." To which Jay replied, "Nah, cunt, didn't T-Bone tell you? This was his old tick mate." I looked at T-Bone, who looked back at me and shook his head and mouthed, "I'm sorry." Jay looked at me with such hatred, it looked as though he was in pain. "Give us the fucking gear, cunt." If it wasn't so dark in this shithole, he could have easily seen my overinflated pocket where the drugs were stashed in an envelope. I looked at the guy in front of the door, and as soon as our eyes met, he put his arm over the door handle, confirming that he wasn't going to let me leave. We all stood there, trading glances. The swinging light made everyone's shadows look like they were moving. Jay didn't like this. T-Bone broke the silence and said, Jay, chill the fuck out. I'll get the money." And he left the kitchen. I thought he was going to bail on me. Who has $2,000 cash just lying around? Jay slowly came towards me, pointing the screwdriver at me. He said in a raspy, matter-of-fact tone, I'll fucking kill ya. I'll do the fucking time. Fucking try me." "That's cute," I replied. Then the painful anger came back into his face. I've never seen anything like it. I slowly put my feet into a fight stance to prepare myself for what was about to happen. T-Bone walked back in and said, "Here's the cash," which briefly diffused the situation. I did a quick count. It was only $1,700, but it was close enough. I threw the envelope of gear to Jay, and the door guard moved, and I got the fuck out. T-Bone followed me, and he tried to give me an apology. "Mate, I had no fucking idea that shit was going to happen. I'm so sorry." I just said, "You owe me $300. And I drove away. I never got that extra $300, and I never dealt drugs again. I also, thankfully, never met Jay again. My sister and I were left home alone for the night because our parents were attending the graduation party of one of my brother's friends. Frankly, I was looking forward to the night of freedom, and I also happened to be closer with my sister than I was with anyone else. After they left, we watched a movie and played some games. I was only about 11 at the time, and she was 15, so my judgment varied from hers greatly. It was around 10 when both of us noticed a flashing of lights on the wall across from us. This shimmering was clearly coming from the front door, which was mostly made up of a window that allowed all light to pass through. She was a bit unsettled, because we lived in a remote area and seldom had visitors. I had no sense of threat since I was too young, and told her I would check it out. When I went to peer out of the front door, I saw a cluster of maybe 3 cars making their way around the loop we had in front of our house. To be clear, this wasn't shared with other houses. In fact, we didn't live in a neighborhood. It was a private drive. I figured they were probably just lost and turning around as the cars left abruptly. I explained the situation to my sister, and at first, she was worried, but as some time passed, she seemed to shrug it off a bit. We finished watching TV and were beginning to clean up around our house when we heard the knob on the entrance door via the garage being fiddled with. It was a bit faint and could have been an animal, which did happen a lot. I didn't worry too much, but my sister continued to grow skeptical. This struggling with the knob went on for a minute or so and was accompanied by some jingling and started to sound like something was being stuck in the keyhole. It subsided, and then was finished with a firm pound on the door as we heard it echo throughout the house. As someone who was still rather ignorant of danger, I became scared, and my sister looked to me as we were in silence. We paused for about 5 seconds out of shock, and before we could make any movements, we heard the door from our basement open and slam shut. Our basement staircase was across the house, and there was no way one single person could have covered the distance in that time. Using a separate staircase, we crept upstairs with haste. Both of us ran to my sister's room, and we hid in her closet. Once in there, we got on the phone with our parents and informed them. They notified the police and informed us to stay put. In her closet, we fumbled through the dark to grab items that we could use to defend ourselves with. She grabbed her snowboard, which had a sharp metal edge on the end, and I could find nothing better than a sturdy hanger. Both of us breathing heavily, we soon noticed something outgrow the sound of our breaths. We heard footsteps resonate and increase in volume as they clearly came closer and closer to her room. Right as the steps came to a stop, we looked at each other in terror because we knew that this person was now in the room. From under the closet, we saw light pierce through the crack as the switch was flicked. The person walked around the room and began moving stuff as we could hear from behind the door. The rummaging stopped, and the footsteps returned. They were distinctly growing much louder, and 2 shadows formed beneath the crack of light under the door, where his feet had prevented light from coming through. The noise, I will never forget, is when the knob on the closet door began to turn. It was met with a stiff halt as we locked it shut. It was odd. No doors in our house had locks, but that one, and thank God it did. He jiggled it a bit, but gave up after a few shakes. His footsteps grew more distant, and soon faded. After about 10 minutes, my sister and I started to feel safe, as we no longer heard any sounds. She explained to me that the distance from the closet to the window that allowed us on the roof was only about 5 feet. We mustered up the courage and darted for the roof. Once up there, we felt much safer, as no one would ever check up there. We waited for about 15 minutes, and the cops soon came. They arrived, and we got back into the house. It was as if we were returning to a completely different house. Everything had been trashed and ransacked. The aftermath left us with stolen jewelry, a mess in our house, and an experience I'll never forget. We're just lucky the intruder wasn't able to break down the 1-inch wooden barrier that separated us from him, and I can't imagine what he would have done if he did. I know I'm not supposed to talk about this, but I just can't keep quiet. I need to tell someone about what happened to me and my fellow airmen back in early 2014. I was stationed at Kadena Air Force Base in Okinawa, Japan, and Uncle Sam had blessed us with the P-8 Poseidon, a modified Boeing 737 that the US Navy turned into a top-of-the-line surveillance plane. It was relatively new to the region, and nothing felt better than knowing that you were in the latest and greatest submarine patrol aircraft on the face of the Earth. It was loaded with tons of fun toys at our disposal to remind the People's Republic that we don't take kindly to it bullying our allies. We had torpedoes, depth charges, slammer missiles, harpoon anti-ship missiles, and surveillance equipment so powerful we felt like we were on first-name basis with half the staff at the PLAAF airbase on the Paracel Islands after only a couple of ops. It was like being the rich kid on the block, the one whose parents didn't just buy him a new bike, but instead went all out and bought him a Ducati. We had done some pretty standard flights in the first few months. Fly around the islands off Okinawa, maybe a patrol or two about 100 miles off the coast of mainland China, doing little more than dropping sonobuoys and intercepting a radio transmission or two that were nothing of note. Then word came down that we were to do a relatively close flyby of Hainan Island, following pretty much the same route that a Navy EP-3 flew during the infamous Hainan Island incident. Our briefing was pretty bare bones, but suffice to say, we were supposed to investigate a mysterious signal another patrol had encountered the day before, originating from somewhere in the ocean near Hainan. This route would give us 70 miles separation from Hainan's coastline and keep us 100 miles away from the PLAAF installation on the Paracel Islands. There was a little animosity amongst the crew, but bravado and rough humor diffused the situation pretty quickly. I recall our co-pilot suggesting that his life would be easier if he just deserted, went native, and took one of the local girls as his wife. My friendly reminder that he didn't speak a word of Japanese didn't stop him from informing me that I was welcome to fornicate with any local livestock I could find. Happy or not, we soon found ourselves loaded up on our Poseidon and heading along the same path that EP3 took on that fateful day back in 2001. The trip to Hainan itself was quite boring, which was fine by me. We had been in the air for a little over 7 hours doing our regular business when we could see the coast of Hainan off in the distance. The trip had pretty much just consisted of scanning the radar to see civilian aircraft moving along their pathways as was expected. When we reached the target area, we dropped 200 feet to drop sonobuoys and let the sensors do their thing scanning the waters beneath us. 10 minutes crept by with not so much as a peep from my instrumental panel. Just as I was beginning to feel more relaxed, one of my sensors pinged a contact about 90 feet beneath the waves. The contact didn't fit the characteristics of any submarine I knew of, and it's my job to recognize the sonar signatures of submarines. For one, it was moving way more than what is expected of a submarine. The network of sonobuoys we had deployed picked up something clipping along at an unbelievable 300 knots. I did a double take. There's no nation in the world that has a sub that can go that fast. The Russians had one back in the Cold War that could maybe go 45 knots, but that was just ludicrous. It was weaving back and forth in a serpentine pattern so fast that it was jumping across the display. It was moving so fast that our systems couldn't even track it in real time. On top of all this, the signature was very faint. If we hadn't had top-of-the-line sensors on board, I doubt we would have been able to pick up the contact at all. There were two possibilities to explain the faint signature. Possibility A: the contact had some sort of a stealth capability that was doing the damnedest to fool our sensors. Possibility B: the contact was very small, maybe just a bit longer than the short bus the Marine grunts take to work in the morning. I was mulling this over in my head when the contact disappeared from my screen. 3 of the sonobuoys had stopped sending information, and as I reached for my comms, a 4th one went dark as well. Not good. I radioed the pilot and told him what I'd seen, asking that we double back to see if we could re-establish contact. He was happy to oblige. Pride runs deep in the Marine Patrol community, and you do not want to be known as the crew who lost a sub. We set a heading for the last known position and ready to drop more buoys. As we neared the spot where contact was lost, my air radar let out a gentle beep, signifying the entrance of a new bogey in our airspace. I hunched over the display, watching as the blip careened from side to side in our direction while maintaining the same 300 knot velocity. It was so unexpected that I found myself unable to look away as the contact carried out maneuvers at an impossible 15 feet above the surface of the sea. Weird approach or not, this was an undeniable intercept course with our plane, and we would be close enough to shake hands in moments unless one of us changed course. The contact disappeared from display, snapping me out of my temporarily stupefied state. I quickly notified the pilot that we had company, about 45 seconds out. He acknowledged, but informed me that the skies were clear as far as he could see. The notion of equipment malfunction began to creep into my mind when the blip appeared once more. This time, It was at 200 feet, our exact operating altitude. It had made a huge distance gain on us in a short period of time. I heard the pilot scream in surprise before my whole world turned into a sudden whirlwind of turbulence. Without warning, the laws of physics decided that everything not bolted down needed to be in another part of the plane right now. Unfortunately, I was one of those objects. Our PA pulled up and banged starboard, sending me tumbling out of my chair and rolling towards the aft of the plane. I had taken off my safety harness when I visited the chem pod about 2 hours prior and had simply forgotten to put it back on. Yeah, I know it's regulation to be strapped in, and shame on me for not being by the book. Buckle yourself or go fuckle yourself, one of my instructors used to say. I was most definitely being fuckled right now. Engine 1 is out, the pilot yelled over the comms. I go back to my feet about 2 stations away from where I started. 3 meters doesn't seem like a long distance until you're ragdolled that distance with a sudden stop 5 seconds later. Another crew member offered an outstretched hand to help me stabilize, and I gratefully took it and started to make my way back to my seat. Bandits making another pass. Brace! The plane shuddered as it bit into a hard turn, stalling my attempt to return to my post. I was about to try and inch my way back to the safety of my seat when the whole station was torn apart from my eyes. Before my eyes. Bullets ripped through the fuselage, sending fragments of metal and plastic flying in all directions. I dropped to the ground, covering my head with my arms, as a shower of sparks and debris rained all around me. It was over in seconds. Well, by over, I mean I wasn't getting shot at anymore. We still were in full-on evasive maneuvers, and I needed to find somewhere to bunker down before I got tossed again. I located a fortunately placed grab handle I could brace myself against. Feeling a little more in control of my destiny, I looked around to get my bearings. I was at the midship emergency exit hatch, just over the port side wing. There was a porthole window on this door. You know, the little window you're supposed to look through to make sure you aren't escaping into a fire? And it was giving me the most unsettling view of the attack I could imagine. He's back! Look out! I didn't need the warning. I could see our assailant clear as day through my window. I was stunned to see that it was an old prop-powered fighter plane. It was a dark green color with a large red circle just behind the cockpit on the fuselage. I'm no historian, but I know a World War II Japanese plane when I see one. Growing up, I had quite the fascination with these old planes, but now, my childhood dreams had manifested themselves as a lethal nightmare. The fighter came at us in an obtuse angle attack run, catching up to our bird with little effort, most likely facilitated by us only being powered by one engine now. I could recognize the type of plane at this point. It was a Mitsubishi A5M carrier-based fighter. Just like the model one I used to have hanging from a fishing line in my childhood bedroom. Twin flashes pulsated along its underbelly as it let loose with a machine gun ornament peppering our tail section and rudder. Controls are down, boys. This isn't good. Like a vulture sweeping in on carrion, the Proto-Zero performed a lazy gliding turn and set course to intersect with us once more. Shockingly, the expected kill shot didn't come. Instead, I saw the fighter pull up alongside us and match our speed like you see in old World War movies, where a pilot pulls up in his defeated foe to look him in the eye and decide his fate. But nothing about this felt like an honorable aerial duel of yore. When the plane reached its mark alongside our bird, I was able to get a look at it. Well, the seemingly empty space where there was supposed to be a pilot. A faint blue glow was emanating from within while shadows danced across the glass panes of the canopy. I was completely transfixed, mesmerized as a child would be by fireworks. Then I saw the hand. Amidst the playful light, a hand clawed at the bullet-resistant glass as though something within was attempting to break out. The owner of the hand made an appearance soon after. It was a young man, no older than 20, rising up from the cramped pilot's compartment and blearily looking around as if he wasn't entirely sure where he was. Finally, he looked right in my direction, his face a twisted mask of pain and sorrow, but overlaid with a hint of surprise, as though he just realized he was attacking another plane. His hands snapped to attention, grabbing at what must have been where the flight controls were located. He frantically pulled at them, throwing the full weight of his body against the controls, but to no avail. He turned to me, and I could see him yelling, his mouth agape while his breath left patches of fog against the canopy. He banged against the glass for about 20 seconds in a vain attempt to free himself from his high-speed prison. Sobbing, he stopped and stared into my eyes. He began to write something on the fogged glass, but I could hardly make it out. I thought I knew what it said, but before I could be positive, the plane veered sharply away. I watched him leave with dread. This wasn't the type of turn you would typically see when a pilot was breaking off engagement. This was one of those hard turns, aggressive and mean and full of flight. The fighter was going to make another pass while we sailed along with one engine and a badly damaged rudder. Sitting duck always sounds like a fun expression, until you are the sitting duck. Worse still is knowing that you are a sitting duck leading up to a kill shot. Second after excruciating second slide by while you wait for the inevitable. He's coming in for the kill, and he's brought a friend. That made my stomach turn. 2 of them? Looks like we're sailing the Poo-Poo River without a boat, let alone a paddle. There was no way we could. I stuck by my window, and sure enough, the A5M entered into a visual range before long. His friend wasn't an A5M at all. In fact, it was a Corsair, another old fighter, but one that had been used by American carriers. Apparently, the years hadn't cooled things between them as they danced before me, guns blazing away. Their dogfights took them all over the place. One erratic turn would send them racing in our direction, while another would push them further away. I took a good look at the Corsair as it made a pass. It had the same blue light coming from it as the first fighter did. Something gnawing at the back of my mind told me that if I were to see a pilot inside the American plane, he wouldn't be any happier than the Japanese one was. They were both prisoners to the bloodthirsty spirits that had taken up residence inside their warbirds. The dogfight continued to ebb and flow both towards us and away, but there was a gradual trend of them getting further and further away. After about 5 minutes, they were just specks on the horizon. You could lose them from sight every now and then before making out the flash of machine gun fire and locating them again. As for us, we limped back to our base in Okinawa. The whole crew was pretty shaken up, and it was quite the treat to explain to our superiors how a World War II aircraft flown by a blue light knocked the crap out of us over the South China Sea. But that was all okay, because we were rescued by another World War II aircraft flown by the same blue light. The whole crew was sent for one-on-one debriefings, and even the ground crew we interacted with were brought in to make sure they knew what did and did not happen. Nothing happened as far as the Navy was concerned. We were sworn to secrecy and reminded about how the government could find very, very deep, dark holes to dispose of annoying people. I just can't stop thinking of that young pilot's face though. I still have nightmares about what happened, but in my dreams, I can make out what that Japanese pilot was writing on the cockpit's glass. It says, "Forgive me." He's begging for forgiveness so he can be released from his living hell. Deep down, I know that those 2 pilots may never find peace, and they're still out there, fighting and suffering. I live at home, and my family and I live in a peaceful, private neighborhood. Or more just a street really, but it's a gated community and we are pretty secluded up on a hill. Now, all you really have to do if you want to get in but don't know the code is wait for someone to go through the gate before you. Some good that does security wise, I know, but it's a very quiet community and everyone knows each other and gets along. So it's usually only the odd curious explorer or lost delivery guy. Oh, and 19-year-old gal here by the way, in case there's curiosity. Now this happened a few weeks ago earlier in the summer. It was just a usual morning with everyone else out at work or otherwise, myself taking advantage of the opportunity to sleep in. By about 10, I was up and I was letting the dogs outside when I heard a knock at the door. We have a glass front door. I decidedly hate those now, and I could see what certainly looked to be a delivery guy at the door, and he could see that I was home so I couldn't avoid answering. Glass doors gotta work both ways, I guess. My mom's always ordering things, so I figured it was something I had to sign for, or the guy would have just left it there and I walk over and open the door. More concerned with the fact that I very obviously had just rolled out of bed more than anything else. There in the doorway is a skinny white guy of about 30 with sandyish hair wearing a brown uniform, collared work shirt, and matching brown pants, like UPS. However, I noticed there's no logo on the shirt. In fact, no letters, name, or writing whatsoever anywhere. Which was weird enough. By that point, I've actually focused in on the guy himself, and that's when it got weird. This guy instantly gave me the creeps. What I noticed first were his eyes. He didn't look normal. Honestly, his eyes weren't meeting mine, and he took a moment to speak. When he did, I almost wanted to crawl out of my skin. He had this raspy, slow voice, and sounded like he wasn't even paying attention to what he was saying.
"I'm here delivering packages,"
he said. He looked behind me as he spoke, not at me, through the doorway into the house.
"What's your name?"
I gave him our last name.
"Oh yeah, I think I have a package for you. Is there someone else like your mom or dad where they can sign for this? I mean, if you're alone though, I bet you could too."
He looked hopeful. He didn't even bother to ask how old I was. Also, I believe for UPS, you don't even need to be 18 to sign anyway. And normally, he'd produce a name and check to confirm, if anything. The guy was fishing. Definitely knowing something was off, but about to respond. That's when I noticed the guy didn't have a package. I froze. In fact, he didn't even have a clipboard or paper of any kind. But he did have a fanny pack on his belt. I knew that wasn't very unusual in itself, but I noticed it looked really out of place. It was beige, and didn't go with his uniform at all. In fact, the whole thing looked more like someone just trying to copy a UPS uniform. When he did meet my gaze, he looked at me like I was a piece of meat. Before he could notice me hesitate, I said, "Oh, yeah, my parents are both just asleep. I'll go get one of them to sign. They need to wake up anyway." And that did it. That set something off in the guy's head. That's when he seemed to lose it. He started mumbling incoherently, muttering something like,
I've made a mistake. This is the wrong house."
And stopped making eye contact completely. He was pacing a bit, as if fighting some internal battle over whether or not to stay. He completely dropped the act by now, and we both knew his story was totally unbelievable. He didn't seem to care. He started walking away and I slammed the door and locked it. Then, feeling a bit safer, I watched through the window as he ran out to the street, where I noticed a large, white, unmarked van. One of the ones with two big doors in the back with no windows on the sides. I wanted to get all the information I could about this guy, so as he books it down the street, I look at the van and get a chill. There's no plates. This was creepy enough, but the worst of it actually came after. I called my dad and told him about the creep. He said to lock all the doors until he got home. Once he did, I gave him a full description, and my dad looked really worried, and I wasn't sure why. I mean, I hadn't been hurt, and the guy was gone, so the threat was over, right? As I said earlier, most of our neighbors are very close family friends. My dad emailed them all a description of what had happened. I went about the day until dinner time came when he told me he had something to tell me. He and my mom hadn't told me before, so as to not freak me out. Apparently, a few months previously, the neighbors directly next to us also had an incident. They have 2 teenage girls, one a few years younger than myself. The youngest one had been home alone one day by the pool when she looked inside and saw someone walking inside their house. Terrified, she had apparently gone around the side of the house into her room and hid, and called either the cops, her parents, or both, not sure of all the details, and waited while she saw this man walking around in the house. There are actually windows in some of the walls in the interior of the house, so she could see from her room into the kitchen and family room and elsewhere. He walked around, opening doors and looking in, but apparently there was money and jewelry laying around that he could have easily taken. That wasn't what he was looking for. She ended up hiding out of sight until she heard the front door close and went out to check if he'd gone. She saw him drive away in the car he left in. It was her mother who had replied to my dad's email. She gave a description of the man who had entered their home. He had been white, wearing a brown uniform, and drove off in a white van. Had I known about it before, I don't know if I'd still have been able to be so calm about the guy talking to me at the door. We filed a report that day. The cop came to our house and seemed convinced it was a would-be robber. I don't think so. Something was up with that guy. He was too socially awkward. He seemed like he didn't know how or didn't care to interact with other people. He looked way too pleased when I answered the door, and when he saw the empty house inside, and he'd walked right past valuables laying out in the open when he'd entered the neighbor's house. And who knows what things could have been in that fanny pack. I truly believe there are some people out there who are just not right. I'm so glad I didn't let him know I was home alone. So, I guess it's been about 9 years or so now, which seems pretty unbelievable to me. It's such a vivid memory that it almost seems fresh. But I think that may also be because I've repeated it so many times by now that I pretty much have an entire monologue memorized, recounting what I experienced. Seems pretty weird to say, but I was definitely lucky. Well, luckier than most, I should say. I knew some kids that saw a lot more of what happened that day than I did. In my opinion, I've pretty much moved on from the shooting and haven't really suffered from any long-term emotional scars. But a few of those guys ended up pretty fucked up from it all. I knew one girl who was super outgoing and smart before the shooting. She ended up dropping out of school our junior year because of a heroin problem, or, well, that's the rumor at least. A few years ago, my sister found out that she had killed herself while spending time at rehab, leaving her 2 small kids with only their elderly grandparents left to raise them. It's sad to imagine what she would have been had that not happened to us. And unfortunately, a seemingly large part of my former classmates have also struggled, some with severe emotional problems and depression, which resulted from that day. Anyway, I guess I'll just start this off like I always do. I remember it being one of the last few weeks of my freshman year. It was cloudy, as it often is during the springtime in Oregon. What I remember thinking, what was initially odd about that day, is that it seemed much too warm for the sun to be hidden behind such a thick layer of clouds. It was hot, sticky, humid, and overall extremely uncomfortable. The high temperature had forced almost all the students and teachers to the courtyard during passing time, 10 minutes between classes, in order to achieve some temporary relief from the stuffy, non-air-conditioned classrooms we were stuck in all morning. I have 2 sisters. One is a year younger and still in middle school at the time. My older sister was a sophomore, but happened to be home with the stomach flu that entire week. It was a Friday, and I remember everyone was really looking forward to our long Memorial Day weekend. My parents were supposed to take my sisters and I for a weekend at a nearby resort town, which is a popular thing to do among our community. I spent the time before school making plans with friends and chatting about the various 15-year-old shenanigans we would partake in. To say that our weekend plans had changed would be an understatement. I had PE first period that quarter, and we spent that time playing flag football out on the stadium turf behind the school. Since I had a free second, I volunteered to take the equipment back to the supply closet in the upstairs gym, while everyone else went to the locker rooms to get ready for the next class. We had 2 gyms and locker rooms on the west side of the school, and a large enclosed courtroom separating them from the other classrooms and administration office. I had finished putting the cones, pennies, and whatnot in their places and headed downstairs in the locker room, deciding to leave the supply closet open for the next gym period, which has turned out to be the single best decision I have made in my entire life. I had nearly gotten to the bathroom of the stairs when I heard a loud... I stopped dead in my tracks as my mind tried to process the noise I just heard. My confusion turned to horror as I heard the screams and saw everyone left on the west side of campus sprinting down the hallways and through the closest doors and slamming them shut. I turned running back upstairs as fast as I could and heard 5 more gunshots by the time I got to the supply closet and shut the door behind me. All I could do was sit in the corner and bury my head into my knees, sobbing. I heard 3 more scattered gunshots, and then nothing. Nothing for what felt like an eternity. I can't even begin to describe how slow time was passing. I had absolutely no sense of time because my cell phone was still downstairs in the girls' locker room, and there was no way in hell I was leaving the safe blackness of the supply closet. The worst part about hiding in the supply closet was not being able to talk to my mom and let her know I was okay. I just sat there, praying and thanking any God who would listen to me that my sister was safe at home. I would have driven myself insane with worry if I was stuck alone in the closet and not know whether or not my sister was okay. I sat and waited for what was either going to be my safety or my death. It seemed like hours before I heard the footsteps. There is no way to describe the feeling of being alone in total darkness, overwhelmed with fear. All of a sudden, I didn't feel like I was completely alone. I heard 2 sets of footsteps running up the stairs and into the gym, and then nothing. Nothing for a moment. Until I was nearly startled to death as I heard one final pop radiate through the gym rafters. My ears rang as I attempted to accept my impending death in the fatal position on the floor as the footsteps headed slowly toward the closet door. I watched the strip of light under the door as a shadow of 2 feet blocked the light and was overcome with terror. I heard the doorknob shake aggressively and began to sob, thinking of losing the chance to see my family again, and that my fate was stuck in the hands of an angry psychopath on a shooting spree looking for the opportunity to execute me as I crouched helplessly in a dark and lonely closet. Before I knew it, the doorknob had been broken off, and the person on the other side of it became a dark silhouette in the blinding fluorescent light of the gymnasium. The next few moments are the most vague in my memory, as a member of the SWAT team pulled me to my feet and ran with me by his side. It was so fast, my feet barely felt the ground. He kept my head down, but that didn't hide everything. I saw so much blood under my feet on the pathways as the officer rushed me through my school courtyard and murder scene. I didn't know him, but I had heard of him from my sister. He was a junior at the time and a very depressed and bitter boy. I guess he had few friends, if any, and always seemed to have a temper. She witnessed him throw desks and have huge tantrums in class when he didn't understand the material, and even once threw a punch at a campus security guard who was trying to calm him down one time. From what I've been told, this is more or less what went down. As I was finishing up in the supply closet, there was an altercation in the courtyard involving the gunman. He had words with another student and pulled out his gun, shooting the other kid 3 times before opening fire on the crowd as chaos ensued, following the first round. After fatally shooting both a student and a language arts teacher, he ran into the west wing of the school and hid underneath the bleachers in the downstairs gym for a while. After about an hour, his cover was blown, and he ran upstairs to the gym, where I was followed by an officer, and then shot himself in the head, which I didn't see. Thank God. It was a pretty terrifying experience, and I suffered from a lot of anxiety for a while afterwards. But I've lived a pretty successful life since then. One thing I've taken away is that no matter where I am, I always make a point to eye the nearest escape and plan of action, just in case. I went to a private Catholic school from kindergarten to 3rd grade, and while I have fond memories of playing with my friends in the massive yard and climbing trees, I also have a memory of something that bothers me to this day. When I was in the 3rd grade, I started getting anonymous notes in my desk. I remember the first one was written on construction paper. It was wedged between my books. Looking back, it seems more like an adult attempting to mimic a child's handwriting. It said that I was pretty and they wanted to get to know me better. I asked my friends if they saw anyone at my desk before class started, and they all said no. They all had breakfast at school, and I always ate at home, so they were in the classroom much earlier than myself, so they would have noticed. The 4 of us sat together in a square. Over the next few weeks, I received a note about once a week. My best friend teased me saying I had a secret admirer, but the whole thing made me feel wrong. Sometimes, these notes were accompanied by oranges, my favorite fruit, or chocolate. Usually, I would find the note, always in my desk, and I would crumple it up when no one was looking and throw it away in a trash can. As the months went by, the notes became more sexual and suggestive. They were always written on construction paper. But about a month in, the note also had pictures of women in lingerie cut out and pasted onto them. The notes were always short and would say things like, "You're so sexy. I want to see you in your underwear. I bet you look better." And then progressed to my admirer professing his love and talking about touching me. I was obviously totally freaked out, but I had no idea what to do. I never responded. I just threw them away. My best friend stopped thinking it was funny and seemed just as scared as I was. Around this time, I started getting them every day. It was so unnerving. One day, I found one while reaching for my spelling book in the back of my desk, and it fell to the floor, right in front of my teacher. She bent to pick it up, and whatever she read made her eyes go wide. She looked at the note, at me, at the note again, and took a deep breath and told me to see her at recess. At recess, she asked me a lot of questions like when did I start getting them, and if I knew who they were from. I told her everything I knew, which honestly wasn't much. She assured me I wasn't in trouble. She went through my desk and found 3 more notes. I guess I'd missed a few, and every time she read one, her eyes got wide and her face got red. She ended up calling my parents in for a meeting. I still don't know what they talked about, but those notes finally stopped. Or my teacher was intercepting them. I don't really know. So, creepy-ass dude who sent graphic, vulgar notes to an 8-year-old, let's not meet.